And you could actually do it, anyway, there's setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. It appears to be going through redirecting. Okay, there
And
we
you could
go.
actually do it,
Okay, we're live.
Okay,
Jim
I will
Hartling.
call the meeting to order. We have three voting members of the committee present. We're missing Jim
Carol,
Hartling.
how are you?
No, he just turned up.
Maybe Jim just showed up.
Jim just popped in. He's right
Okay,
here.
so all the voting members of the committee are present. We have Vika and Carol here. So call the meeting to order. No members of the public are in attendance, so we will skip on to the second item on the agenda. Review the draft annual report for the Board of Selectmen. All of the committee members have seen it. It's been going back and forth and being tweaked all week. I sent it late to Vika and Carol. I know Vika looked at it a little bit. I don't know whether you had a chance to or not, Carol.
Yeah, I looked at it briefly.
Okay. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's, we could play around with it for the next week and tweak this and that, but I think it's a very good summary of the work we've done and the direction we're heading. So unless one of the voting members wants to discuss something, well, I guess I would entertain a motion to send the report this afternoon to the town office so it can be forwarded to the select board and in the packet for next Wednesday's meeting.
I'd
So
make
I'll
that
make
motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Yep.
Any discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor of moving the report forward, say aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Aye.
All right, so that passed unanimously. I would point out that the presentation to the community is part of that, and that is a draft presentation. So that may get tweaked a little bit based on feedback from the select board, or I would say Jay and Chip are going to end up being the presenters. So I would defer to them if they want to tweak a few of the slides to better communicate what we're trying to present to the community.
John,
Yeah,
can I
do that.
step in here a second?
Sure,
Right.
Jim. This is a technical question. There's a button here that says start video and it won't work. Is someone at your end have to give me video?
It shouldn't be. I don't know enough about hosting these things, but I don't think so, Jim. It might just be re-signing in. I don't think I have the ability to
Well, you're probably not.
I can ask you to yeah.
Well,
doesn't-
I just was curious because I haven't had this before. So anyhow, okay. Sorry to
you know.
interrupt, but I was hoping to see people. I assume
you
you
can't see us either?
I can't see you at all. I see a blank black screen.
Oh,
It says you are viewing Town of Chebeague Island's screen. It's black.
When you
Really?
when you signed in, did you sign in with with the picture, or?
Well, I signed in at the normal Zoom sign in using our code number and our secret number, and
Right.
everything was fine until I got to this point.
Huh.
Well, anyhow, go ahead. I'm just telling you, I see nothing, and you presumably don't see me. So,
No, we don't see you. You're a
give you your name.
large head and a wider body with no legs.
okay. Well, I don't know. I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's keep going.
No problem.
So the next item on the agenda is, we went from 1 to 3 to 4, so we're on 4. Solar array next steps. Ellie Hughes and I had a video conference with Steve Hinchman yesterday. I sent my notes from that discussion along with the model that Steve used in the original purchase offer to the town that had the cash flow analysis. The previous versions he shared with us didn't always work for me. I think this is a better version. Coming out of that meeting, Steve was going to go get Q4 24 data from the solar array and from CMP and do the same thing for Q1 of 2025 and then update the model. One of the questions that came out in the discussion was, you know, they have a number in the model for the insurance costs, and he mentioned whatever insurance agency they use, but he thought it would make sense for us to get a quote from the insurance company for the town for what it would cost to cover the solar array. Is that something you could reach out to the insurer about, Vika?
Did we lose Vika?
I don't know.
Appears
She's on mute, but she's on.
I think I got frozen for a few minutes there because my phone completely rebooted everything, but I'm here.
Okay, so the looking at the solar array cash flow, I discussed that with Ellie and Steve Hinchman yesterday, and he said that one of the things that's on there is insurance costs, and he said we ought to reach out to our insurance agent and see what their cost would be for insuring the solar array. Is that something you can do? We can't
Muted,
hear you.
Vika.
Sorry, having technical difficulties. Yes, I'll shoot them an email right after we're done, so then that way we can have an answer hopefully by next week's meeting.
Okay, or whenever we meet again. Yeah. He kind of confirmed a lot of the things we heard from Matt last Friday. The notes are there. He encouraged us to take that model and create a conservative and an aggressive scenarios. He characterized it as a good deal currently for both the owner and the town. He's not all that concerned about what might happen in Augusta with net energy billing. He said most of those conversations are focused on solar buyback or solar net energy billing schedules related to the tariff plan, and we're on the kilowatt plan. But then we went on and talked about, well, what happens if they do reduce the credits on the net energy buyback to, let's say, 80% of the CMP standard rate, or even 50% of the CMP standard rate. And he said, well, probably at that time, it will really make sense for the town to buy the solar array. And I said, well, I have to think about that. And actually, you can go into the model and you can model that. So as we move forward, I think we should look at that. There's also a column in there, and I think it was in the original proposal, but we haven't looked at it recently, whereby what would be the payback and the cash flow if you financed it. So we might take a look at, I was thinking we might take a look at that because, if we take the money out of the reserve account that I think is currently, all the reserve accounts are earning about 3.5%. You could look at that as financing because we use the money for the solar array as opposed to left it in the reserve accounts earning interest. It would be one way. And then Chip, I think we need to do some more work on your present value of money or future value of money as opposed to just cash flow.
Mika, have we heard anything? Sorry to interrupt, but you brought up that we're currently earning 3.5% on the reserve funds. Have we heard anything from the bank about that lately?
No, we haven't. I have a meeting scheduled. I'd have to look at the my calendar with the bank. I try to meet with them annually where I was going to bring that up, but I can follow up to see if they can bump us up at all.
More likely, they're going to want to go the other direction,
Well, that was
given what's going on in the markets. That's all.
yeah. No, they did bump us up from what 1.5 to 3.5, 4%. I think it's a little bit around 4% within the last year or so, but I'll ask.
Thank you.
So then the other discussion we had, Mika, when you weren't here, it might have been last week, was we have the money in the reserve fund to buy the solar array if that was the recommendation and the selectmen went forward with that recommendation. Would there need to be a warrant article to actually buy the solar array and or enter into a operating and maintenance agreement with Revision?
So I am almost certain that yes, we would need to have some kind of a warrant article because right now it's not officially town property, and you always want to ask the taxpayers if they want to take on any town property. But before doing anything, I would definitely double check with the town attorney on any proper language that would have to go into the town warrant.
Okay, so I don't think that this committee is in any real rush to make this decision, so I don't think we would be ready for the annual town meeting, but there was talk about there may be town meeting to address ordinance changes or things that the planning board wants to do.
There is
like
some
that.
at the town meeting in June, there will be some ordinance changes. As of now, the plan is to have them. There is a hearing coming up on the 25th of April for the different changes that they're proposing. There are a number of other things that are kind of up in the air, whether, I mean, I'm just going to use a random example, needing to bond Stone Wharf if we have to do something between now and next town meeting. But there are a couple of things that might require us to have a special town meeting between now and maybe into the fall or early winter. In which case that could be added on. I think with the revision, if there isn't a very strong benefit for the town to take it on right now, I don't really see the point of us trying to really rush it to put something on the warrant for this time around because we are nearing. So May 7th, I believe, is the last meeting that the select board is going to have talking about the budget. And then after that, I have to turn that information and put it into town warrant to the town attorney. So we're kind of getting into crunch time for adding new things.
We're not targeting to meet this town meeting, that's for
No.
sure. Okay, any other points people want to make about the solar array? Steve's going to update the model with a half a year of information, and then we'll come back to that.
Quick question, since you can't see me raising my hand. Have we pinned down what they were comfortable with ongoing maintenance costs?
Are we comfortable with what was in the proposal for the maintenance costs?
Well, we were looking at a spreadsheet. I missed last week's meeting, but we were looking at a spreadsheet that had a couple of a big expenditure at one point, and then another year where there'd be like 18,000 spent.
You're right. Yeah, I would say we're not totally comfortable with the maintenance costs. No,
Okay,
no. No, and that might be part of the downside scenario where we'd have to factor some maintenance in there. Okay, move on from solar.
Hey, can I interrupt for just a second? It's Herb.
Sure.
Jim, do you have in your lower left of your screen, do you have a camera icon?
yes, and I sent you a message back saying the button doesn't work.
You don't get any options when you click
I
it?
click on it and it just blinks.
You don't have your laptop closed or something, do you?
No, I'm staring at a black screen.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay,
Thought it might be easy.
thank you.
Sometimes maybe logging in and logging out and logging back in could solve the problem.
Okay, well, I'll do that right now. I don't want to interrupt the meeting. Keep
No
going.
problem. Okay, so the next item was, I think when we formed this committee back in January, there was some talk about if we thought the committee was a good thing and should continue, that we should think about having a warrant article to establish a standing finance committee. Is that correct, Vika?
That is correct. What you as a board are working on now is a guideline that was provided by the work that Herb and the other two individuals did. And that was proposed to the board. The board approved it as kind of a guideline with the intent to have this committee bring forth an ordinance to town meeting. And so it could be as simple as, Herb and the other group did all the work to it. If you go through the guidelines and you as a board agree on all of the terms and information in it and feel comfortable bringing that to the select board, then that gets added as a warrant article, and the taxpayers would determine that, yes, we want to vote this in as an ordinance, or no, we don't. Right now, what you're working on is it's a 1-year guideline instead of an ordinance. So that's something that I would recommend that the committee try to take a look at and make a decision on in the next couple of weeks, so then we can determine whether we want to put that ordinance in front of the taxpayers. The voters,
Okay.
excuse me.
Okay, and Herb's group last year had a draft of that we could start from. You think?
Yep. So the work that was done, the select board adopted the whole thing as guideline. And so if you like exactly how it is, the language could just be changed to ordinance, and that could be proposed to the board, to the select board for town warrant. If you all go to the town website under boards and committees and go under the finance committee, the guidelines are all clearly laid out there. And that's kind of, the draft work that was presented by the previous committee to this one, with the idea that it will hopefully go to the board, or you would make the choice to bring it to the board for town meeting for an actual ordinance to be approved.
Okay. Other discussion items?
Yeah, I had my hand up, and maybe it's not obvious.
I'm sorry, I can't see that.
Yeah. On that issue, I think just one thing to bear in mind, if we make it a standing committee, we've got to populate it. We're really having trouble populating our existing committees. I don't know if there's any harm in continuing more as a guided committee for the moment. I think the reason to make it a standing committee is to sort of give you standing and power, recognition in the community that this is a long-term commitment. So I personally, and so I don't mean to disagree with Vika, but if you wanted to go another year and kind of you know, you've done it for not even a whole year, you might want to give it a little more time so that you can fashion it as the committee you think it, you know, would be best.
Okay.
I do get a little worried about I mean, we create a lot of ad hoc committees, and those are a little different, because if they collapse, it's not a big deal, but once we create a standing committee, then we've got to populate it, and we are definitely challenged on that. Not with you guys, obviously, but, and maybe that would just keep you going for the next 5 years or so, but that's one worry I have on the select board.
So if we're an ad hoc committee, we can't be sued? Just kidding.
Just tarred and feathered.
Well, so the listening to Carol, I think the recommendation was 5 members, and we struggled to get 4, and so we didn't meet until January when we had the 4th. Would 3 or 4 be acceptable for a standing committee, or is there some guidance on the size of a standing committee?
Yeah, I think you gotta specify, I mean, you've only been operating for how many months now?
4.
Yeah, I'd recommend you give it a little more time so you know what works and kind
Okay.
of, you know, I think you guys are doing great, and, you know, if this is a model committee and it's function and form, but just in terms of all the criteria you gotta establish, if you make it an actual ordinance and we pass it at town meeting, then, you know, then it's set in stone, so to speak, until you change it again. So it seems like you haven't had much operational time to kind of know that yet. So I would take a little more time. And to answer that question that John had earlier, I think we are planning a special town meeting to deal with some floodplain maps and ordinances sometime in the summer months. We probably don't want to tag too many things on there, but something like, you know, even then for if finance committee ordinance or something, we could probably do.
Okay. Well, you convinced me that there's no downside to waiting till perhaps a year from now to move forward with the standing committee ordinance. And, then it also gives us an opportunity to go through this one complete budget cycle. We started late and we're behind the 8 ball the whole time here. So I would ask, what do the other voting committee members think of that, waiting a year?
Question from me here, since you can't see me. Do we need to recommend that they extend the guideline for a year or whatever it's called? Does there need to be some action of that type?
I think if this is the direction that the board wants to go in, I think it's just an update to the select board, letting them know what your plans are. And I can't imagine that the select board is going to be opposed and say, no, you need to bring an ordinance just like it says. And if it's discussed and acknowledged between the select board and this committee, then I don't see any issues with it whatsoever.
Okay.
You have something to say?
To stay as is. I'm good with it.
I don't see what the benefits of not staying the way we are.
Agreed.
I'm dealing with the negative in my mind. So you recommend we stay as we are?
It's the double negative, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a positive.
Okay.
You don't want to not change.
It seems like
Oh,
we're
come
all
on.
the same page
Now
on
he's going to
that.
have triple negatives. Throw a maybe in there, and then we'll have a good equation.
Yeah, I'll recommend that formally.
Okay. Other discussion items. So we got the update from you, Carol, on feedback on what the state thought should be in the Stone Wharf Fund. And that was basically 20% of whatever the total project cost was. And then I didn't understand why he had SHIP in parentheses at the end, if that's a grant program with a maximum of 250,000 associated with it.
So I think he was just reminding me that, the SHIP grant eligibility is not challenging, so I think he was just reminding me that that's a source of revenue potentially. And I was asking him in the context of the earmark request that I'm working on right now. And I think what he is saying is that's a favorable position to get funding from federal entities or even Maine DOT. I think some of that could be the town passing, a warrant article saying that we're gonna bond a certain amount. It doesn't have to be cash in the bank. But we have to have, and this is coming up as I prepare the CDS application. The fact that we would have to bond some of the money to do a project. It's not as certain, because it's up to the voters, as having the money available. So that puts us in a slightly disadvantaged position, but it didn't matter last time we went through last time. So I will say there's way more applications this time, so we'll see what happens. But I think he was speaking from the DOT perspective that if we come up with 20%, the feds might match 80. And the grant bucket we fall into for the earmark is actually 2575. So we actually have to have a little bit more.
So how much would that be for what you're thinking about writing proposals for?
Well, I will tell you, I got a much more detailed cost estimate, which is still a rough cost estimate for the stone pier. And with the engineering firm we're working with, and they came up with $7 million to widen the road, raise the wharf slightly, do some of those basic improvements, circular traffic flow, but not the golf course parking lot, not a lot of other things. And so that's what it costs. So so that's 7 million. And the recommendation from Senator King's office is that we do not apply for that amount, that we apply for something less than that, because they don't generally give out earmarks in Maine for, it's more like 3 to 4, something like that, which is what we did last time. We asked for less than what we knew we needed, and that puts us in a better position. So
in terms of this issue about the reserve account for the stone pier, how large do we need to get that to be competitive in what you're thinking about?
Well, I think the ship has sailed on this earmark. We can't, unless we already had it in there, we can't say we're gonna put it in at town meeting, because that's not certain. So basically, for now, it's what's in there, which is 600,000. For going forward, we want to sort of be heading as close as we can to, I think what he said was like 1.2 or something for a $6 million project. So
Well, currently in the reserve fund, I think there's 600, and the current game plan is to add 300, right?
well, I mean, and I think I know you guys had a different perspective on that, and I think that's something we can.
Yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to get back to that. So that's the one thing that we want to discuss on Wednesday. We have an attachment to our report that says these additions to reserve accounts should be considered. And I think those additions total 165,000. But it comes down to what are the priorities. That stuff could wait a year if it's more important to, try to have the stone pier up to 1.2 million by, a year from June or July or whatever.
So
that's
the and I wouldn't, hang our hats on getting an earmark. I think the CDS timeframe is a year out to even here, and then it takes quite a while for them to kind of do the paperwork. I'm kind of skeptical. I can't quite picture this process going forward in the current, scene up in down in Washington, I don't know, they'd have to pass a budget and maybe that will happen, but, it takes a while. We've been told by everybody 12 to 14 months just to kind of make a decision. And then there's, paperwork with the agency. So we'll see. But I do think and maybe, Chris Mayo is the guy at the Maine DOT that we've been communicating with. And he is the one who, I think I recall now that he had sort of said the same ratio, that the town needs to come up with at least 20% of the project. So, like I said, though, that could be us passing a warrant article saying we're gonna bond, $3 million. It doesn't mean it's all cash.
Right.
But at the time we want to be eligible for funding, we do have, the difference is you do kind of have to have it allocated and in hand. And right now I can't say, yes, we can bond 5 million and we'll have it,
Okay. Other discussion items?
I have to run off and head to an appointment for 2:45. Do you guys have any last minute questions for me before I sign off?
I don't think so. I think just so you know where I think we're headed is I've already sent off our annual report with the attachments, so it'll be in the packet for Monday. On Wednesday, we're on the agenda. We're going to talk about primarily potential adjustments, changes to the reserve accounts. And there may be other questions that come up in some of the next steps and things we're working on from the select board. Jay and Chip are going to be the presenters at the community presentation in May. So they may tweak the slides on the presentation a little bit, but I don't see that this committee has anything to do unless something comes out of next Wednesday's meeting with the select board. I don't see that there's really much more we can do for fiscal year 26 planning. So I'm going to propose to this group is that we meet again shortly after I'm back from a trip and after the community presentation in May, and get organized for what we're going to do for the summer into the fall for the fiscal year 27 budgeting and solar array and some other things. So I went through that only so you could tell us if we're missing something.
That all sounds good to me. I'll take the email that you sent and I'll forward it to the select board, and then Chris can add the information to the packet. And then if you guys need anything, just let me know. But I'll follow up with the insurance company and the bank relative to the questions that you raised today.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you
Thanks,
guys.
Victor.
Have a
Good
great
luck.
afternoon. I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Just
Other discussion items, Jay?
just one, SHIP grants got mentioned a couple of times. A few years ago, I met with somebody or other from Maine DOT about SHIP grants. They came out and looked at the wharf and looked at a bunch of other things. And basically as Carol pointed out, 250,000 is the maximum, but they can do 2 or 3 of those sequentially. If they decide to approve everything you're doing. At least that was at that time. God knows where we are now.
right. And so I think that's right. We also, frankly, immediately need to apply for a SHIP grant for the work at Chandler's. The filings are on the order of 90,000, and so they're halfway through their fiscal year, and so he said get that in soon. But it is kind of this continuous program, pretty easy to access as long as we're kind of on their priority list. But there are other sources of funding. Well, there have been other sources of funding that flow through DOT that are federally sourced that they can allocate. And I think and those are bigger chunks of change, but I don't know what the future looks like on that. But for example, the bipartisan infrastructure money, they could allocate up to 4 million, and some towns got it because they were ready. for something like a stone pier project. So it's hard to know what the, things look like into the future, but there may be some opportunities for big, big amounts if we're in the right time in terms of our design and our finances. I don't think it's like we have to get to 1.2 by next year. I think it occurs to me that right now, I think we're setting up a meeting with the project engineering team for the 25th, which is a week from 2 weeks from today. And it might be worthwhile for some or anybody on the finance committee who's interested to join that meeting, because part of the discussion will be about the finances. And he'll also go over the cost estimate that he came up with. The engineer is pretty uncomfortable providing a cost estimate at this stage of the project, since they are really not that far into it, but I think it's a better number than we've ever had, and much more realistic in terms of what it will probably be. And he used real-time costs from other projects he's currently working on, so I think those numbers are pretty solid. So if anybody wants to join that, it's set Friday morning on the 25th.
Okay, is it an in-person meeting or Zoom?
Yeah, they're coming over here, they're gonna look at the wharf, and I think they're gonna meet at the town office around 9. I'll send you the information. I will also provide you with a copy of his cost estimate, but ask that you not distribute it beyond, he wouldn't want that out floating around in public, but you guys would be interested in it.
Great, thank you.
A related
I'm gonna be out of
question.
town.
Go ahead, Chip.
I'm going to be out of town. That's all. 25th. I'm away.
A related question, Carol. Do we have a sense of what the next stage of engineering required is and what that's going to cost?
Yep, he provided that in there, and we got a grant to cover this portion. And
I saw that.
Right, and their estimate's still under that grant, so we have some more capacity, I think. I didn't tell him that yet, but
Well, but at some point they've got to design, they've got to create the bid specs, right?
right, so their total cost, which probably includes what they're doing now, I actually haven't looked at the thing in detail, is about, several, $500,000 or something like that to
Just
go
like
through.
this. Okay.
Yeah, so it's to go through the whole design process, which would be, construction documents and helping decide on a contractor, all that jazz. And so I'll send that to you guys, and you'll have a chance to look at it. And if you have questions about that, you could ask him at the meeting. He's a pretty accessible guy.
But my question is, if we're moving ahead with this project, and I assume we will, when does that engineering money have to be accumulated?
In the reserve, in the reserve account. So you can kind of, in my world, you can kind of consider that the reserve account's going to cover the engineering costs.
Right.
But the total cost that I mentioned, 7 million, includes that engineering cost.
Okay. So if it was expended on engineering, that becomes a credit in the match.
Correct. Well, no, not
Well,
exactly. No, wherever you are, whatever you're applying for, it becomes a credit. Whatever you have available becomes a credit for whatever you apply for, and anything you can't use past work.
Oh, that's a twist. Okay.
Okay, other discussion items.
Yeah. John, you
Anything at all?
started to talk about the next meeting after the presentation to the community.
Yep, we're moving on to the next schedule. Yeah, future meetings. So do we want to move away from Fridays because we're getting into summertime?
Well, if we met from 1 to 3, we'd avoid the cocktail party problem.
But that would work. That would work for me.
Yeah, earlier.
Or we could
So
serve
when are we
cocktails.
back from Putin's turf?
What? 1 to 3, or even better, 1 to 2.
Yeah, that's good. We should
Well, we
target,
should be able to, I mean,
we should
if,
target 1 hour meetings, just like
Yeah.
this one.
yeah,
All right.
So
Uh,
when do you return, John?
I don't get back until the 20th, so I was thinking, the 23rd, 1 to 2, and you guys can tell me everything you did while I was away.
Okay,
And that's after the community presentation, so you have feedback from that. We know we've got solar array stuff to continue tracking down, so. And like, as I said, I think we need to lay out a game plan to get through the summer and get into the fall and get integrated in the normal budgeting cycle.
Okay.
So
And
does
it-
that work? May 23rd, 1 to 2?
yep,
Perfect.
yeah. I leave the day after for a couple weeks, pretty much. Yeah, 2 weeks.
Perfect.
So,
Okay, Chip sent out the minutes for the last 2 meetings. Motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
I'll,
All in favor?
aye.
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 All right, the minutes are approved. Anything else for the good of the cause? Okay, our next event is the selectmen's meeting on Wednesday. Thank you all. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Okay,
Thanks, John.
thanks,
Cheers.
John.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Carol.
Mhm.